Half of the skin or integumentary lecture here, we're going to take a look at the dermis, which really involves the two main layers of that, and then some of the specialized structures that are involved with the dermis. A few things that you're going to be able to need to identify on this one as well. So if we're looking at the skin again, you can see epidermis. The dermis is going to be that next layer. And we kind of mentioned already what the hypodermis is. This dermis, again, is going to have some other accessory structures in it, along with its basic layout here. So this would be a thick skin one here. You can see a lot of dense irregular connective tissue. It was one of the things that we looked at on the scopes when we were on site, taking a look at this. The upper part of it we're going to see is some more areolar connective tissue. And that's what they really break this down into. You can see you have the dermal papilla, which are that kind of increasing surface area that makes sure that the epithelium on the surface stays well connected to the connective tissue underneath. The loose connective tissue, that areolar connective tissue that is kind of feeding in and out of this with a lot of capillaries and stuff in it, is what makes up that upper part here. And where those dermal papilla are, where they're coming down like this, we call this the papillary dermis, that little layer underneath it. Beneath that, we have lots of dense irregular connective tissue with those collagen bundles. That is referred to as the reticular dermis. The papillary dermis is about the upper 1/5. The bottom 80% is going to be that reticular dermis. We're going to see that there is a few specialized structures in some of this. We have what are called Mesosner's corpuscles. These are your touch receptors coming into the dermis. Mesosner's corpuscles, a much lighter touch type of sensation that these are what they're going to receive. Or Pacinian corpuscle, these are in there a little bit deeper and are much more pressure receptors than just light touch. You can take a look at this. So up in those dermal papilla, every once in a while you'll see one of these little, almost looks like a little bean, maybe like a little larval something or other there. You can see the little lines going across it. This would be a Mesosner's corpuscle. It's quite small. Versus the Pacinian corpuscle, you see this big circle here with these layers going around it. That is that Pacinian corpuscle. It's actually a much larger structure than the Mesosner's. And again, both these dealing with kind of sense of touch. The other stuff here is we can talk about the Sebaceous apparatus, or kind of the hair follicle and those things associated with it. To me, you need to be able to identify a hair follicle, some of these sebaceous glands, an erector pili muscle and what it looks like. And then just a little bit of other stuff with that. So you can see here, this is that apparatus. You can see you have that hair follicle where the hair is growing up through the center of that. There is actually layers to the hair. We're not going to get into the histology of the layers of the hair or all the parts of the actual hair follicle, but I would want you to be able to identify the hair follicle. You can see going up there. We can see there's some associated glands with that are called sebaceous glands. These are your oil glands of the skin, where your sweat glands, you can see over on the right side of this image, are they are separate from those hair follicles. The other thing you can see is it looks like two little mini biceps attached to this hair follicle. Those are what are referred to as erector pili muscles. It is smooth muscle that helps to stand these hairs up on end. Something that's a little bit more vestigial, like non-used in humans. When we had more fur, if you think about birds or animals, sometimes they have their hair stand up to look bigger or to trap air and stay warmer. We don't have enough hair anymore to do that at this point. So you can see here a picture of this hair follicle. That dark black right here would actually be the hair. We can see these glands right here are connected to that hair follicle. That would be a sebaceous gland. And then the erector pili muscle, you can see that smooth muscle going on a line right there. Again, we'll try to take a look at all this on an actual slide as well. And the sebaceous glands, they're kind of an interesting one there. They are always connected to a hair follicle. We also have something called an Eccrine sweat gland that is also always going to be connected to a hair follicle, where your sweat glands do not connect to those. A lot of times we talk about them being Merocrine or Eccrine sweat glands. They have their own duct. The hair is not way different from the skin. You have this little beginning layer down here. This is where the hair divides. And it's a keratin-filled, pretty much epithelial cell. Just like the skin. Different type of keratin. And it's, again, similar to the skin. The very bottom layer is what's dividing. And as that divides, it migrates upward a little bit. And as you lay down more cells, the stuff moves further and further up the hair until what was at one point at the base of the hair in that kind of hair matrix beginning is going to be the tip of the hair on the outside of the body. Like I said, there's a few different types of sweat glands we need to know, glands we need to know about. We have sebaceous glands, what are called eccrine sweat glands, and then apocrine sweat glands. All these are actually housed in the dermis, and we're going to see, depending on the type of sweat gland, type of gland it is, it does different types of secretion. And we're going to see that there's 3 different ways that a particular gland is going to make its secretion. We have what are called holocrine, merocrine, and apocrine glands. The easiest way to think about this one is holocrine glands, when they make their secretion, the cells that are making it become the secretion. So the whole cell, for that example, becomes the secretion. Merocrine sweat glands, these are the ones that use vesicles. So like your merocrine sweat, your thermoregulatory sweat, this is one that it makes vesicles and just releases the substance out of the vesicle and none of the cell is lost. So merocrine, just vesicles, none of the cell is lost. Holocrine, the whole cell is lost. When we think about an apocrine gland, it's kind of in the middle of these two, where part of the cell is generated and shed off to become the secretion, but not the whole cell as we would see in a holocrine sweat gland. You're going to see apocrine sweat glands, not surprisingly, do an apocrine function here. Your eccrine or merocrine sweat glands, your thermoregulatory sweat, do this one. Up in the corner here, the merocrine one. And holocrine, we're going to see, is kind of what happens with the sebaceous glands, those oil glands. So you can see an eccrine sweat gland, that is your thermoregulatory sweat. It is going to have its own little duct separate of a hair follicle that it's going to excrete its stuff out through, where both an apocrine sweat gland as well as a sebaceous oil gland, both are going to dump their contents into a hair follicle. Sebaceous glands, pretty much found on the entire body with the exception of the hands and feet. These ones are doing a holocrine type of secretion. A lot of times we refer to these as oil glands. They make something called sebum. Helps moisturize the skin, helps to prevent stuff from growing on the skin. These are very lipid rich, and again, as these are being made, the whole cell is going to fall apart and become the secretion. And again, empties into the hair follicle. And you can see the sebaceous gland here. A lot of times you'll see this with the hair follicle. You'll see these large kind of non-staining cell things here on the screen. Again, high in lipid, does not stain particularly dark. And again, usually associated with a hair follicle. Sometimes you'll see it next to a hair follicle, but not with the connection there. It kind of depends. You have to get the right plane to see. Here's the follicle with the connection right to it. Sometimes you'll see something like this. You'll see the follicle right here and the actual sebaceous gland right next to it, but you won't see the connection. It just kind of depends on if you get the right plane on that particular slice when the slide was made. The eccrine or merocrine sweat glands, these are the ones that are involved with thermoregulatory sweat. You're going to get vesicles of mainly watery substances here that are going to be released out in here, and then we have these contractile epithelial cells called myoepithelial cells that are going to contract and help cause a release of that sweat. And again, this is when you're trying to thermoregulate. When you get too hot, you will sweat. This is those glands that are involved with that. And you can see these down here. A lot of times you can see on this one right here, it's an extra curled gland, but because it's a swirled up and kind of coiled gland, when you slice through it, you're going to see a bunch of circles. This is one of the spots where we will see a stratified cuboidal. So you can see right here a 2-layer cuboidal going around the lumen on that particular image right here. And again, these myoepithelial cells, I wouldn't expect you to be able to identify those different from the actual eccrine sweat glands, but I would expect you to be able to identify an eccrine sweat gland. But the myoepithelial cells surround it, and that's what helps to cause the release of that particular sweat. And the last one here, the apocrine sweat glands, they're in the armpit, around the genitals, a few other areas like this. These ones open into hair follicles, become much more active at puberty. Main thing with these ones, in and of themselves, they don't create an odor, but bacteria can break down the byproducts of them and sometimes will give you an odor. These are the ones that are generally considered to be involved in kind of pheromone-like responses. As humans, we like to think we don't have the stuff here, but they've done a lot of studies in terms of sex appeal and things like that. They've had these studies where no deodorants, anything else like that, have a male wear a particular t-shirt for a day, take it off, bag it up. You have different women rate its, I don't know, either how nice it smells or how offensive it is, but they do a little Likert scale. The ones that are rated better tend to have better reproductive numbers, tend to have higher sperm counts, better sperm motility, other stuff like that. When they do the same thing with women and the men, have the women wear the t-shirts, generally those that are rated highest are closest to ovulation in their cycle. So it's really kind of one of these things that we like to think we're not like other animals and that we don't give these signals like that, but we do. And you can see these apocrine ones here kind of bursting off the top of that. So I'm going to show you a couple different slides that deal with the dermis and the skin here. So you can see this is a piece of skin. You can see it is thick skin. Papillary dermis would be up along these little ridges right here. Reticular dermis is all this dense regular connective tissue doing the bottom part of that. This is a slide, like I said, it's in the third set of the boxes here. It does have what are called Pacinian and Mesosner corpuscles, and that's the first thing I'm going to show you in this one, and then we'll go to a second slide to show you the hair follicles and some of the stuff that goes along with that. So first thing to look at is kind of the Pacinian corpuscles. If we zoom in right down here, you're going to see there are these wrapped structures right here. If I can zoom in a little bit more. So these two things right here would be a couple of Pacinian corpuscles. If we want to look at the other type of corpuscles, the Mesosners, we're going to have to look at one of these little structures up near the top here and zoom in on one of those. And what you can see on this one, and these are a little bit harder to see, but again, kind of this bean-shaped structure right there. They are going to be up in this dimmer papilla because they are more that light touch, and that would be that Mesosner's corpuscle. So the other thing I want to show you is we're going to go over to the U of M slides here and look at the integumentary system. This one is going to show you overall kind of the hair follicles. So just right off the bat, again, you can see epidermis up here, dermis working down through here, subcutaneous as we get lower. One of the things that I want you to notice right here, this would be a hair follicle. So with this structure over here, you can see some slices through some other ones right there. What I want to do is zoom in on this center one right here because there's a few interesting structures that are around that. So here you can see the hair follicle traveling down, and I'm going to move this over to the side just a little bit more so nothing's in the way. You can see this hair follicle traveling down. You can see this gland right here, and the duct is actually going right in here. This would be a sebaceous gland along the side. The other thing that we can see that is very present in this one and is quite obvious is you can see this area right here. If we were to zoom in on that a little bit more, you can see centralized nuclei, tapered cells, that is smooth muscle. This structure right here is an erector pili muscle. So you can see the erector pili muscle going back and attaching to this gland, attaching underneath the gland to the hair follicle, which could stand that hair follicle up. The other thing that's in close proximity right here is if you look at this little area right here, this coiled set of structures right here, you can see it is a stratified cuboidal cells. Those are actually a part of the Eccrine sweat gland or the Eccrine sweat gland right there. And my guess is if we went and looked at a few other areas, you can see another one right here. Probably another set of them right here and right here as we move our way across this slide. So that to me are the main structures that you need to be able to identify on this one. This really does finish up our material for the next exam. So we're going to be traveling from the stuff that is on the Moodle page up to integumentary system. The next stuff that will be going in will be endocrine, but that will not be on this next test.